is our second podcast of Carnivore Radio. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, and I'm being joined, as always, by Eric Lopkin. And Eric, what are the topics that you really think are really critical for this week's conversation?
Well, we've got a lot of news this week. New job numbers came out that were very positive. Donald Trump it now looks like in May he's going to actually have a meeting with Kim Jong-un, who has said they are willing to talk about denuclearization.
Okay, and this is after time does fly, Mr. Lopkin. Almost at least 25 years, starting with Clinton, of completely failed policies, basically propping up this leader, giving him incentives to do actually virtually nothing, but create nuclear weapons. Is this argument that how unqualified and unfit Donald Trump was or is to be president, isn't that to kind of fly in the face of when you look at Hillary Clinton's tenure as Secretary of State? Not a lot of victories there, are there?
No, there aren't a lot of victories there. And this is a big deal because no president has sat down with a leader of North Korea. They've all said, well, we have to isolate them, we have to put pressure, but then they never actually followed through and did anything.
No, actually, I think they kowtow to him, which emboldens them even more. They don't take us seriously. And that's another point I'd like to bring up. As Obama's tenure as president becomes, now we're going into year two, more in the rearview mirror, doesn't today's topics, the potential meeting between Trump and the North Korean leader, plus the job numbers, isn't it starting to get a little clearer that maybe Obama wasn't the rock star everyone thought he was?
Oh, and that's certainly true. I mean, remember, all of the advancement that North Korea has had on their weapons and the advancement that Russia has had on their weapons that they just announced, these things take time. They didn't just happen in the last year since Trump took over. These were going on during the Obama administration. But there were so many things. There's so many things that were going on in the Obama, or weren't in case of jobs. I mean, we were on the buzz, during the Great Recession. Do you remember how gloomy those days were for job seekers? And even, into the Obama administration. I mean, in 5 years into it. Yeah, there was growth, but the labor market was pretty awful, wasn't it, Eric? It really was. There was very little growth, and that was the problem. Today, the job report that just came out showed that the U.S. added 313,000 jobs in February. Now, remember, Obama used to keep saying we were at full employment. Well, clearly we weren't, because jobs keep getting created. The participation rate is growing. Because
that's two critical elements. I remember, hearkening back to those dark days. I remember when jobs numbers like 50,000, and it was touted as we're moving in the right direction. Labor participation was at its all-time lowest. So moving forward to the midterms, what do the Democrats have to hang their hat on besides identity politics, Eric?
I don't even know that they have identity politics anymore.
Because of black unemployment so low, and
blacks are finally finding jobs.
Exactly.
You've got the women's movement now. They might be able to hang something on that. But the argument seems like it's getting a little thin. Parties.
What's that?
Even the women's movement, you don't have a unified movement. You've got Republicans and Democrats involved in that, and both see their side as the way to victory.
But speaking of the way to victory, what can the Democrats do in the midterms besides creating a lot of smoke to have a message that will get them victory? Final closing segments, Eric. What can it possibly be?
At this point, I think the only thing they've got to hang their hat on is Mueller pulling a rabbit out of a hat and proving that Donald Trump had colluded with Russians and he was corrupt. I think that's the only thing they've got.
Dr. Lopkin, great two subjects, and our second podcast is now in the books, and we'll be back next week with what's in the news to discuss.
You've been listening to Carnivore Radio's podcast. You can catch us here every week. Carnivore Radio is part of the Xvadio podcast network. You can listen to the podcast at blogtalkradio.com/Xvadio. If you want to be part of the conversation, you can listen to us live every Friday at 4 o'clock on WESU 88.1 Middletown, Connecticut. You can also catch us online at WESUFM.org. We look forward to hearing from you, and see you next week.